Were the Nazis socialists, far left? The answer is yes. The National Socialists were one of the most horrible left-wing terror regimes of our times. This video will show you that the ideology of the Nazis has its roots in socialism. The following quote is from the founder of the Nazi Party, Anton Drexler. In his book, My Political Awakening, from the Journal of a Socialist Worker, he writes, "I never made a big deal out of my socialist views." And further on he says, "There's one slogan that brings us together, and that is socialism and communism in the spirit of Christ." So, how can we understand this quote? Clearly, he stresses the importance of socialism and communism in the Nazi Party. Why in the spirit of Christ? Probably to differentiate themselves from the other socialist movements that were very popular at the time, for example, Marxism, which favors the abolition of religion. Furthermore, Christianity could be seen as an anti-capitalistic belief system that favors the poor over the rich. What are the beginnings of the Nazi Party? The DAP, Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, German Workers' Party. Later on, NSDAP, Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, National Socialist German Workers' Party, was founded by the socialist Anton Drexler. He was also chairman of the NSDAP until Hitler took over the chairmanship. Drexler supported Hitler in the still small National Socialist movement and was considered Hitler's mentor. Hitler first came into contact with the Nazi Party, the NSDAP, or earlier DAP, when Gottfried Feder gave a lecture on the subject of how and by what means does one get rid of capitalism. Looking at the history of the Nazi Party, one can find many anti-capitalistic ideas. For example, the 25-point election program of the NSDAP. The election program mentions land expropriations, socialization of trusts, profit sharing in large companies, communalization of department stores, breaking of the financial slavery to interest, replacing the materialistic world order, death penalty for usury, public benefit over self-interest, and the strengthening of the state apparatus. These are clearly socialist demands. The Nazis called themselves comrades or party comrades. It is a typical term used by left-wing parties and goes back to the SAP, Socialist Workers' Party, which was founded in 1875. Socialist parties were very common in the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic refers to a time before Hitler took power, especially the period from 1919 till 1933. Many people in this period suffered from poverty, which led to the rise of many socialist movements and parties. And one of those were the SPD. They were part of the government and promoted a socialistic state. But the founder of the Nazi Party complained that the situation for the workers was not improving, despite the socialists' promises. Anton Drexler criticized the fact that socialist politics had an international focus and felt that this was treason, since German people were neglected. He wanted socialism to be oriented towards national interests, hence the term National Socialism. This also explains the general opposition of the Nazis to Marxism, which was more international. According to witness accounts, media material, and old recordings, Hitler's position was thoroughly socialist. One high-profile witness, Otto Wagener, Hitler's close economic advisor, described Hitler's worldview. Hitler said that the future of socialism lies in the Volksgemeinschaft, people's community, and not in internationalism. The term Volksgemeinschaft describes a national community without classes. Hitler saw it as his task to lead the German people to socialism. According to Wagener, Hitler was of the opinion that it was time to find and walk the path from individualism to socialism. That Marx and Lenin saw the right goal but chose the wrong path. He believed there was a faster and more efficient way to socialism without civil war. According to Otto Wagener, Hitler wanted to address all socialists as well as the communists and bring them from the international to the national camp. Hitler saw the greatest goal of his time in replacing the reign of capital over the working class with the reign of the working class over capital. Joseph Goebbels belonged to Hitler's inner circle. In his 1931 book, Der Nazi-Sozi, Questions and Answers for the National Socialists, he wrote at great length about the class conflict, the struggle against capitalism, the liberation of the worker with the help of socialism. "We want a Germany of the working class," he wrote. He saw international socialism only as a ruse of international capitalism, an opposition to real socialism. Various other sources and propaganda material confirm the clearly socialist attitude of Hitler and his Nazi party. For example, opposition to capitalism, stand against high finance, liberation of the worker, opposition to unrestricted trade, community is everything, frowning upon individualism, higher taxation of the rich. Those are all leftist demands. And did the Nazis only talk about socialism? No. Once the people voted for them, the National Socialists put in practice a social program which benefited the poorer in particular and which was not entirely dissimilar to the demands of today's left. Pension increased by 15%. In 1941, pensioners received full health insurance for a symbolic contribution of 1 Reichsmark. Sick pay was introduced. Families received financial support for their children. Measures were taken to protect debtors as well as tenants. It was quite difficult to evict a person or to collect his debt. Company and corporate tax increased from 20% to 40%, which during the war climbed to even 55%. Payroll tax was never increased despite the war. Laws were introduced to limit your rights to your own possessions. The Nazis centralized the economy so that small and middle-class businesses had a very hard time to survive. So yes, even during the war they acted on their socialist promises. As dictionary tells us, right-wing also means opposed to socialism. Socialism, on the other hand, is seen as a movement that is against a free market. Socialism wants to give the worker more economic influence and higher social security. This is exactly what the Nazis talked about and put into practice. How could Hitler have been right-wing? According to this definition, Hitler was left. One could ask, isn't socialism about giving power to the people rather than a dictator? The majority of the most dangerous dictators and autocrats of the 20th century was socialist. There were many despots who rose to power on the wings of socialism. For example, Hitler, National Socialist German Workers' Party, Saddam Hussein, Arab Socialist Party, Slobodan Milosevic, Socialist Party of Serbia, Mao, Communist Party of China, Stalin, Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Erich Honecker, Socialist Unity Party of Germany, Nicolae Ceausescu, Romanian Communist Party, Gaddafi, Libyan Communist Party, Pol Pot, Kampuchea Communist Party, Kim Il-sung, Communist Party of Korea, and others were horrible dictators, autocrats and fascists. Even the inventor of fascism, Benito Mussolini, was for a long time a social activist and after the First World War committed to uniting the left. Mussolini was a prominent member of the Italian Socialist Party, editor of the socialist newspaper Avanti, and later the owner of the socialist magazine Utopia. And yes, Mussolini was sometimes against socialism, but then again in favor of socialism. But what about the idea that racism falls on the right side of the political spectrum? Right-wing politics has nothing to do with racism. Per dictionary, it is rather a movement against socialism and for conservatism. Right-wing politics prefers self-regulating markets instead of a big government. This has nothing to do with racism. Racist ideologies and hatred of other ethnic groups were rather common in left-wing terror regimes. The majority of Jewish publicists in Russia fell victim to Stalin's purges. Stalin also committed genocide against Ukrainians. Up to 7 million Ukrainians lost their lives. Other ethnic groups also fell victim to Stalin's tyranny. Milosevic, Socialist Party of Serbia, carried out ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. Mengistu Haile Mariam, Workers' Party of Ethiopia, was convicted of genocide. One of the most racist countries in the world today is Communist China. Racism is not uncommon in the Chinese society. An exhibition in China compared African people to animals. According to official reports, the Beijing government recently placed over 1 million Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps. The UN expressed their alarm over reports of organ harvesting from minorities held in detention. In the Weimar Republic in 1923, Ruth Fischer, a politician of the KPD, Kommunistische Partei Deutschlands, Communist Party of Germany, said, and I quote, "Anyone who calls out against the Jewish capital, gentlemen, is already a class fighter, even if he doesn't know it. You are against the Jewish capital and want to fight the stock market jobbers down? And rightfully so, kick down the Jewish capitalists, hang them from the lampposts, trample them. But gentlemen, how do you feel about the big capitalists?" This quote clearly shows the anti-Semitic attitude within the German Communist Party. In 1924, a short time later, the same Ruth Fischer was elected the leader of the KPD, Communist Party of Germany, more than 9 years before Hitler even came into power. Not only Hitler, but as well other left groups targeted Jews because they thought they are connected with exploitative capitalism. Why do people think Nazis were on the right side of the political arena? After the war, the winners might have tried to divert attention from the fact that the Nazis had their origin in socialism, perhaps also to take into account the sensitivities of the victorious Soviet Union. Originally, the terms left and right came from the sitting arrangement in the French Parliament during the 1789 till 1799 revolution. On the right sat those who were in favor of maintaining classes monarchy, and on the left sat those who didn't want a class system or monarchy. The NSDAP was against a class society and for the abolition of classes. The NSDAP wanted a classless national community, Volksgemeinschaft. The Nazis should really be called left-wing. Conservatism on the right stands for the preservation of the existing order. The left is in favor of socialistic reforms. From this point of view too, the Nazis are to be classified more on the left, as they overturned the existing system and wanted to create a new socialist order. From today's perspective, the right also represents the concept of less state and more economic freedom for the individual. This was undesirable to the Nazis. National Socialism was all about more power to the state and stronger regulation of the individual. This point of view also places the Nazis more on the left side. During the Nazi times, communists and socialists were arrested and even murdered. So, how to explain that? The Nazis made a distinction between international socialism and national socialism. They viewed international socialism or communism or Marxism or Bolshevism as a threat to the nation. Before Hitler was voted into power, other socialists were in the government. The Nazis hated that those socialists didn't take care of the national interests, but rather served the interests of other countries. This is why the idea of National Socialism took hold. The National Socialists wanted their own socialism, which would primarily serve their own people, hence the name National Socialist German Workers' Party. The effort to eliminate other supposedly red Jewish forms of socialism, communism, ultimately led to the arrest of the supporters of such movements, including the Social Democrats. It is also worthy mentioning that leaders of other left-wing parties did not think twice about fighting each other. So there is no contradiction when Hitler had international socialists, communists, Marxists or social democrats locked up. There were also purges within the National Socialist Party, just like with other socialist parties throughout history. Stalin had leftist groups arrested that didn't belong to his party, such as the left social revolutionaries, and had them shipped off to Russian concentration camps, gulags. There were many similarly dispatched victims, even among his fellow revolutionaries within the Russian communist movement. Cuba, China, North Korea, and other socialist dictatorships acted in a similar way. Violence, the suppression of opinion, an authoritarian state, an oppressive system, and other crimes of the Nazi era are not based on right-wing conservative thought models, but rather on left-wing socialism. And in the light of this, it would make more sense for far-left groups to protest against themselves instead of groups that are conservative or patriotic. Thank you very much. I hope we see each other soon. Please visit our website.